Okay then, here we go. This is Bolton Parkrun number 612. It took place on Saturday the 17th of August. And just for reference, I completed this in 22 minutes 42 seconds. So I'm running at 7 minutes and 19 per mile. As you can see, Bolton Parkrun, the start of it takes place on what could be considered to be quite a narrow path. It's solid underfoot, there's plenty of space on the grass at either side, but it is something to consider if you are thinking of finishing in some of the higher positions. It's probably a course that rewards, if you are thinking of finishing slightly higher up the field, a fairly fast start, possibly at the expense of slowing down a little bit later on. For some things, if you're thinking of finishing higher up the field, actually running it as a negative split can be quite difficult for reasons that we will see in a moment. So we're descending the first of the hills. This one's known in the local area as Cinder Hill. I've got no idea why. The ground is nice and solid underneath. You never really need anything more than a pair of road shoes with good traction for Bolton Parkrun. I have seen people do it in trail shoes. I think it's overkill, to be honest. I mean, if you're comfortable in trail shoes, by all means use them. But for most of the time of the year, you really don't need them. Even though, as you can see from the conditions underfoot, there can be some mud, but most of the paths are nice and firm, nice and compacted, and you've got no issues at all. So we've got at this point down to the bottom of the first hill, and what we're going to do, we're going to pass one of our super friendly marshals. There's Gary. We're going to take a sharp right and we're going to start our first ascent. As you can see from the path, it is at this point still quite narrow. There's a few trees conveniently positioned right in the middle of the path. There's one of them. So if you are thinking of overtaking anybody at this part of the course, it can be quite difficult. Over a small wooden bridge, we've got another marshal there to our right, and the course starts to climb fairly steeply at this point. The conditions underfoot are still really good. Got a little barrier there because to the right of it, it does drop off. The path does drop off down to a brook that runs through the middle of Leverhulme Park and under the road on the other side. I'm just being overtaken there by a runner. It is possible, but as you can see with the athletes that he's about to approach just in front of me, it's not the easiest of paths for overtaking anybody. So nice hill just to get the legs moving. Hear a lot of people breathing deeply at this point as we approach the top. Careful not to take the path to the left. But as you can see, it's perfectly runnable. If it is trail, it's not technical trail at all. And it really is suitable for virtually every single type of runner and walker that you can think of. So the tree cover at this point is going to become an awful lot thinner, and the course is in a second going to open out. We are going to pass another marshal, and then we're going to begin the first of what amounts to quite a few out and back sections on Bolton Parkrun. Now this is the central path of Leverhulme Park. It's a fantastic resource, Leverhulme Park. It's the largest park in Bolton, and as you can see from this shot here, we've got no shortage of open space. Now the park run runs for, at this point, a quarter of a mile on a very, very gently sloping incline towards the first of the out and back points. And this really does represent probably the first opportunity on the course that you would be able to overtake somebody confidently and safely. So bearing in mind by this point we've been running for coming up to around half a mile, I think, at this point, it does show that you really do need to think carefully about your position on that start line if you want to be ahead of other people and be in those higher positions. As you can see, there's always plenty of dog walkers on Leverhulme Park, but it's never an issue. People are always aware that the park run is on. And as you'll also see from the screen, the first athletes that have already been through the turning point are already coming back down this path. And as you'll see, what that does mean is that you've got to be really disciplined in terms of keeping left. So we're just going to go past these trees, and then there's an old football play area just to the right of me there. You can just see the goalposts. We're going to go right up to our marshal, which I think from memory on this occasion was Kath and Andrew. There they are. Always be welcomed with a smile at this point. And we are now heading back along the out and back. Now, as you will see, we've got a large number of runners now starting to come in the opposite direction. And you can also see from this shot that although the path is much wider than the ones that we've been on thus far, it's still not incredibly wide, and we still have to be really careful to stay to the left-hand side of the path. You'll also see some of the paces that are in operation at Bolton Parkrun at this point. And this is probably the first opportunity that you've got, because it's gently sloping downhill, that if you're thinking about accelerating now and just moving away from a group of people, or trying to catch up to a runner in front, or simply just trying to increase the pace, this is one of the first opportunities that you've got on this course to do that, and to do that really, really effectively. You won't be able to see it because it's just behind that tree line that's in front, but Leverhulme Park Athletics tracks, it's just on the other side of those trees. Used by lots and lots of running clubs, including my own Burndon Roadrunners. We have a track session there every Wednesday. I coach one of the groups on there. It's an amazing resource for the whole community. You don't need to be a member. You can pay as you go to use that facility, and it's a really good track. It's freshly laid. In fact, it was redone a couple of years ago. We are going to head through the gate, and what we are going to do, you can see the runners coming up from the path that we've just taken. What we are going to do is take this path on the right hand side. So this path that we're about to take is running parallel to the path that we came up. It's just on the other side of the little brook that lies to the right hand side of the bushes. And again, familiar theme at Bolton Parkrun. A path is quite narrow as we start the descent down back towards Cinder Hill. So if you are thinking about overtaking anybody, just got to be really, really careful at this point, because there's a couple of bollards sticking up. There we go. There's one of them with a high-vis jacket on. Other than that, the ground underfoot is perfectly safe. Just a few trees and branches that you just need to be mindful of, particularly if you're my height. Once or twice I've been caught short and just reminded that I needed to duck a little bit when my concentration's gone slightly. As you can see, although we are descending, it's not too steep, and the trail certainly is not technical. Now, you can just see the runners in front starting to turn right, and the ground that we are about to turn right onto might look familiar, because this is the bottom of Cinder Hill, which is the first hill that we ran down. We've effectively just done a large loop. The first time we came down here, there's Gary, we turned right. This time we're going to turn left onto a slightly wider path, and now we're going to head in the opposite direction through the park. We're going to pass the river. Now, in winter, the path that we're about to run on at this point can sometimes become quite flooded, in fact. But obviously in August, that's not going to be an issue, and as you can see, the ground is really firm. Certainly no need for trail shoes on a course like this. And we're going to continue in this way now for another minute or so, out towards the base of the first climb up what is affectionately known as Cruella de Hill. Now, in winter, some of this parts of this path can be really, really wet, with quite a few large puddles. In fact, there's no way around them. They're the sorts of puddles that you've just got to run straight through. And even though it's summer, you can still see the fact that um, there are parts that are waterlogged and saturated. So it's just a little hint of the fact that sometimes when you're running down here in December, January, February, it can be quite tricky underfoot and very, very wet. So we're just going to head through the trees out towards Lever Bridge. I don't think the camera is going to be able to pick Lever Bridge up, but there's a huge old railway bridge that spans the bottom of Radcliffe Road, which I think is going to be just out of shot. But it's well worth at this point, if you're taking your time around the course, just having a look up through the tree line and just having a look at the bridge, because it can be quite impressive. So just passing the railings, we're going to come up to another marshal. We're going to take a left up the steps for the first time, take another left, and then we're going to make our first climb up Cruella de Hill. As you can see, road surface is completely changed. Now we've got a tarmac and the path has opened up and widened out significantly. So a really nice place to overtake, but this is a fairly steep hill. And as you can see from the two runners that are in front of me, you can see with their cadence and just their general demeanour that they have slowed down significantly from the pace that they were running at on the path. For me, sometimes my pace will slow by 30 seconds a mile, 45 seconds per mile, just for this point. It's not a huge hill. From the barrier right down at the bottom, we've come in just before that barrier to the crossroads. It's 1/4 of a mile. So it's not enormous, but it does take up a significant percentage of the overall distance at parkrun, and we do go up it twice. So it is something just to think about if you have never done this course before. There are times of the year when the leaf coverage can make it quite slippy, but most of the time it is absolutely fine. We are approaching now the top of the hill. This is now just still climbing, but it's nowhere near as steep as the part that we have just come up. And there's that runner to the right of me. He's nice and sprightly on his toes again. And we're going to approach now a part of the course that will be familiar to you. If not from the video, then at least it will be if you come and run this course in person. Because what we are going to do is take a right in a second and pass our starting point. Now this is always a nice part of the course because it tends to get a lot of marshals here, because all of the people that manage the finish funnel and the timekeepers and so on are just ahead of us there. So you're always guaranteed a nice clap and a bit of support. And as we approach this bin that's just coming into shot on the left hand side, we're also passing the starting point. All we are doing is running in the opposite direction as we approach another out and back. So we've got a little turning point in a second. Again, always marshalled. You can never get this wrong. This bit is a slight incline, so it's always nice to get to this point, to turn, and then to head downhill slightly. As you can see, we've got a lot of runners coming in the opposite direction. This time we need to stay on the right hand side because they're obviously coming up on the left. They've just turned the left, and we've just passed the starting point for Bolton Parkrun, and we're about to go out again and do another lap. Now we're not going to do the whole thing, which you will see in a minute. We're going to do a much shorter lap this time. We're not going to do that large out and back, which means we don't have to do that long hill, the long first hill that we did. So we're going to scoot around the outside of what was the old play area. We've got Leverhulme Park track just in front of us. And then we're going to do a left again and run back down Cinder Hill. This is always a really good part of the course if you are aiming for a particular time to really start to work hard now at this point. You've found your place within the field. You can see who's in front of you. And you've got this downhill section now to really start to push on. As you can see, there was a little barrier there on the left-hand side. There is a bit of a steep drop there. The camera's not really picking it up, but there's quite a lot of erosion on the left-hand side of the path there. But if you're running down the centre of it and you're just mindful of where you put your feet, it genuinely is not a problem. Now, I'm not speeding up at this point. I'm not trying to catch anybody. I'm just running. But if I wanted to catch those two runners in front of me, this would definitely be one of the times where I would be putting in the effort, because this downhill section can be used really, really effectively to catch people. You can see people that are just coming off the first of the loops. This lady in front with the orange top, couldn't see what colour it was then, with the orange top, has obviously just completed our first loop. Now what that does mean is that as we go around for the second loop, some of the people in front of us are effectively in the park run behind us. So this lap can be a little bit more congested. And that's not an issue. It just means that you've got to be careful about how quickly you're running and who you are overtaking and where they are and so on. So we're passing the river for the second time. I can see that of the two people in front of me, only one of them is effectively in front of me in the park run. That lady there is obviously still out on her first lap, which is fantastic to see. What I want to do though is just negotiate these puddles, move over to the right, and just get my head down a little bit. Again, this is a really good part of the course. If you are really going for a particular time, you absolutely have to be working hard now on this part of the course specifically. And the reason for that is the ground is absolutely fantastic underfoot, the few odd puddles notwithstanding, but also it's quite flat at this point. And remember, what is ahead of us in about a minute's time is our second time up the hill, up Cruella de Hill. So what you really need to be doing at this point is putting in as much as you possibly have. If you're going for a particular time, or if you're trying to catch up to anybody, now is a really good opportunity to be able to do that. I always think as well that even though this is a fairly long section of the course, in terms of Bolton Park Run, it's one of the longest parts, one longest continuous straight parts. It always seems to go pretty quickly. So just need to be mindful of the people on the left that we are passing. We're going to come up to our marshal, which I think was Craig today. And we're going to hit these steps. Now, these steps always feel, to me at least, harder work than the hill. So here we go, turn, and then we're on to a few steps, and these really do break the cadence up. They always seem to break any rhythm that you might have up, and then onto the tarmac, which always feels a little bit jarring after you've been running on such lovely trails. So we're going to work hard up this hill. You do have to do a little bit of weaving. We do ask people, obviously, to keep to the left to allow people that are on the second lap to run up on the right. Works moderately well, but as you can see in front, it doesn't work fantastically well. So you just have to be really mindful about who's in front of you. And as long as you are, you'll find that you've got plenty of space normally that you can use to run into. The second hill at Bolton Park Run, this one, second time up here, can really catch people out if they've never done this course before, because it is quite lengthy, it is quite steep, particularly at this point. You can see there's a lot of people in front of me that are walking. It is quite steep, it's quite lengthy, and it is a little bit of a challenge. I think it does make Bolton Park Run interesting. It does help to have those hills in there if you want to run it as a really hard effort. You feel like you're getting something from it, but it is something just to be mindful of. So as you can see, perfectly runnable. We're getting to the top of it now. And what we're going to do, we're going to be approaching the crossroads that we saw all of those marshals on before. Now, there's not going to be as many marshals standing there this time because a lot of them will have gone to their finish funnel positions and timekeeping positions and so on, because we are approaching now the end of this. So when you're on this lap at this point, this is always quite nice because you've been working hard. Most of the hard work is behind us. All we've got to do is negotiate our way through the athletes that are in front of us, and we are very, very nearly there. So just like we had to do on the first lap, we're going to turn. So now we've got a mixture of people on laps 1 and on laps 2. We're going to avoid the dog, and we're going to run into this space for the penultimate out and back turning point. I say penultimate because we've got a little surprise one to negotiate in a minute. But once you do get to this point, that's it. That's all of the climbing completed, all of the uphill done. Can sort of take the brakes off at this point, can freewheel a little bit. Again, if you're going for a particular time or position, you absolutely have to be working hard now. There's not really an excuse. It's a gentle descent. The tarmac underfoot is fantastic. So you've got no issue with traction or the running surface at this point. It can be a really, really quick end to your park run if that is what you are looking for. What we are going to do is those runners in front are going out for their second lap, but what we need to do is to turn right and head out towards the final turning point. There's the finishing funnel on the left hand side, and in a moment we're going to spot our 2 timekeepers. That's the finish line, so we are very nearly there. We just need to work hard up this path. I love this part of the course because it almost feels like you are running on a track. The tarmac's fantastic. The running surface is really, really good. And we know that all we have to do is negotiate this final turning point. There's our final marshal. And if you need to have a sprint finish, now's the time to have a sprint finish. I've had quite a few battles over the years on this part of the course. And what we're going to do, just going to gently accelerate down into our finish funnel, over the finish line, and there we go. That is a fantastic 5k at Bolton Parkrun. If you haven't done it before, I hope you've got something from this little commentary, and we hope to see you soon.